first part of the show. If you will give just a really short synopsis here of, first of all, the financials and maybe the any Earth things that's coming up between now and, let's say, the end of this year. Let's just talk about for the next couple of months, just a
short-term view.
Yep.
We're going to get to
after the first of the year.
Right, we're just going to get to the drama of the dollar death. The process that was begun with the birth of the dollar is coming to completion. We're going to see chaos as our financial institutions that are built around the dollar and the idea of the dollar as global reserve currency try and cope when the dollar is no longer accepted as a global reserve currency, and that casts doubt on everything that is based on confidence in the U.S. Because once confidence goes, it's an eroding kind of a thing. Thus, it's like morale. If you don't have good morale, boy, things can go to hell real quick, and we're going to see that exposed over the course of this coming fall. Of the fall we're in now, and the coming winter. And against that global depression unfolding, we're going to see really strange weather beyond what we've seen already, and a continuing series of large earthquakes that will be destructive and will continue to be destructive, will strike repeatedly in various places, and will continue to grow and show up. So, for instance, the next place I expect to see as a series of earthquake centers will be the Caribbean. And we'll see the same kind of effects occurring there that we're seeing off the New Hebrides and the Sulawesi Islands in that bow wave of the Australian plate moving. We're going to see with the Caribbean plate.
Interesting.
That actually may cause East Coast U.S. to experience a series of earthquakes that are basically will be aftershocks of that. And actually it will be because of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. So, we may actually be fortunate enough as individuals in our species to witness or live through the planet actually expanding.
Okay. So we have one question here that might be interesting. It says, how high is the confidence that July 7th, 2010 is such a turning point for the planetary revolution, similar to your October 8th call?
At the same level. In fact, it's in that same level of emotional sums. And the duration level, though, we have impact and we have duration as two broad categories of emotions. And so the emotional impact level will be it will be as accurate as the October 7th, October 8th call. It will be the turning point for the active revolution globally, not just within the U.S., although that will actually be specifically for the U.S. The U.S. is going to be a bow wave for the whole global thing. And we have very high confidence in that. Doesn't mean anything is over by that stage. Doesn't mean very much of anything would change necessarily, but it's just like in the future we'll be able to look back and say, yep, this particular instance, battle, decision, or something that occurred on that date was the actual turning point, and thereafter we were pretty assured we'd won. It was just a matter of going through the suffering to get there.
Okay, gotcha. There was a question that I had that came in as you were talking, and now I can't remember what it is. Figures, but it was about the turning point when you were talking about that. Let's see if I can get back to that thought process for just a second.
Well, actually, okay, and just let me divert here to say that this actually is a tipping point, not merely a turning point in emotions, the way we're going to see in emotional language, and that we're going to see in October the 25th here. We're going to have a turning point in our release language on the 25th of this month, and we're going to go into building tension for 10 days, and then we're going to be choppy language through the rest of this year, more or less. What occurs in July on the 7th of July of 2010 is, in fact, a context change that puts us into a plateau of emotions that continue for, about 4 or 5 months, I think. At least 3 months, and then we go into a tipping point. So the tipping point is equivalent to the incidents that happened in 9/11. Thereafter, nothing on the planet was the same, and so a tipping point changes everything all of a sudden in a quick rush.
Gotcha.
The context change that's going to set us up is what occurs in July of that year. We're going to have a number of months of hard slogging, so to speak, and then we'll have a tipping point.
Okay. I've asked you this question before, and I'm going to ask you the question again. Is there any kind of a replacement for the American dollar that shows up in your reports, or that you have heard of, or you've seen, or running reports, or what have you? Is there a replacement?
No, there's no official replacement that we see showing up. In fact, the data seems to suggest a degradation down to basically various different kinds of barter over this period of the next year as we get in through the revolution.
So, here's the only thing that I have a problem with that is I'm sitting here thinking that, all of those people in Washington, and certainly the powers that certainly can see what they've created here and what's happening, that they wouldn't have something in place or something prepared to go into place.
Okay, and see, that kind of doesn't matter, because what people fail to understand is how these things actually occur. In 1913, when Wilson signed into law the Federal Reserve Act, that created the Federal Reserve, but the dollar was not really an effective currency until perhaps 20 years later, in the 30s, and that's when they were trying to save the dollar during that first set of depression. But, for instance, there were Federal Reserve notes that were in concurrent circulation with silver certificates issued by the federal government. So all through the into like the 1920s and the Roaring 20s, that was in the Roaring 20 period of time when the German state was suffering Weimar level of hyperinflation. We had a period of inflation here in the U.S. that was part of a global wave of inflation, and our inflation was in the part of the currency realm that we had going that we called the dollar. But at that time, there were also such things as silver certificates that did not participate in the inflation. So it took them a long time to get confidence in the dollar to where all of the silver certificates and everything were eventually retired over the course of the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
I remember them, yes.
Yes, indeed. See, so look how long it took for the dollar to become an effective currency. And it wasn't until the various agreements in the late 40s, as a result of our economic dominance of the planet and the fact that we could bomb the two major war-powering states to submission, that allowed us to dictate the petrodollar situation. And that's what propelled the dollar into its global reserve status. So that's basically existed, say, since the mid-50s. Again, in order to have something to replace the dollar, they would have had to have started to introduce it to us in a fashion that we would have found acceptable perhaps 12 years ago, just to get us up to the point where we would have confidence in exchanging it back and forth with each other. We see a modern-day example of this in the euro. Look at how long it took them to actually introduce the euro as a currency. They were talking about it for 10 years before it actually was introduced. You see no commensurate undertaking at all the other way. And so here's the alternative. Say that they attempted to force a currency on us, and the level of confidence would be non-existent. In fact, I would say, just predicting, that there would be a backlash in confidence. And if someone said, you must use this new Amaro made out of this really nice red plastic in your use of, daily transactions, I would start thinking, well, I got that silver coin over there. I wonder how many of the red plastics I could get for that silver coin. And effectively, we would go to a gray market economy right away that would establish the true value of those red plastic discs that everybody would be calling the Amaro. Make sense?
Yes, it does. Interesting.
Okay, so it's entirely confidence, and no, it cannot be replaced by dictatorial wave of the hand kind of a thing.
Gotcha. Well, here we are. We're almost at that point again in this show that we are going to have to let you go. When is the next reports due out? I had that written down and I moved that piece of paper.
The 15th of December. We'll try and be early. We're going to start the interpretation in November. We're going to have the pipes turned on here fairly quick for the data flow. So I got to get back into it and disappear from sight, so to speak, through November as I'm doing the work. But we'll have it out in early December. However, it may be quite moot, in the sense that, it may have all unfolded so much by then that everybody will say, no, I don't want to, I'm living it. Why should I read about it?
Well, and certainly there's some information, though, that there is some very unique information that comes out of these reports that I would love to continue to follow with you, and certainly would love to have you back on the show, depending on if we're all still here and all that at that point, I would certainly love to have you back on.
Okay.
When those reports come out, if you're so inclined to be with us again, because
Sure,
you're always
sure.
such you're always so fun to have on. Anyway, you really are.
Well, thanks for that. It's just mental deficiency, I'm sure, on my part.
Well, how about mine? So I told you we're in that boat together, man.
I couldn't possibly go there. I'm much too polite.
At least on the air, you can write me later.
There we go. Okay.